What if one of the largest territories ever depicted on the maps of Europe hadn't disappeared after a war, hadn't been destroyed by a natural disaster, and hadn't collapsed overnight? What if it had simply been given a different name? For centuries, European maps have shown a vast land called Great Tartaria. Today, many have never even heard of it. But why were the most authoritative encyclopedias and cartographers of their time convinced that it existed? And how does a territory larger than all of Europe gradually disappear from the world's memory? This is the story of Tartaria, one of the greatest mysteries in the history of cartography. Everyone knows that the largest empire in history was the British Empire, so say the textbooks, atlases, and encyclopedias. According to them, it occupied about 24% of the Earth's land area and was the empire on which the sun never set. But on maps from the 17th and 18th centuries, another name appears, a vast territory called Great Tartaria. In this video, we will understand why European encyclopedias have described this vast territory for centuries, why it occupies an area larger than Europe and China combined, and why today it is almost absent from public memory. The most important question, however, remains the same. Was there ever a country called Tartaria? London, 1771. A new edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica is being prepared in one of the printing houses on the Strand. The smell of ink, hot metal, and linseed oil fills the premises. Dozens of typesetters arrange the lines of text, and editors review manuscripts from authors from all over Europe. A new edition of the most authoritative reference book of the era has been published. In the volume with the letter T, the reader finds the following entry: Tartaria, a vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bordering Siberia on the north and west. The following is a description of a territory that extends from the Caspian Sea to the shores of the Pacific Ocean and from Siberia to Persia. The area indicated is approximately 14 million square kilometers. For comparison, the whole of Europe is about 10 million square kilometers. Today, this sounds incredible. Such a state does not appear in modern history textbooks. But the Encyclopedia Britannica is not a collection of legends. It is a work created by the leading scientists and geographers of its time, and this is only the beginning. In 1688, in Paris, Pierre Duval published his geographical history. On one of the maps, a huge inscription designates the central part of Eurasia as Great Tartaria, not as a region, not as an empty space, but as a clearly marked political territory. In 1727, the Swedish cartographer Johann Baptist Homan published a new map. Tartaria was again included. In 1866, Carey's atlas was published in Edinburgh, and there Tartaria was again indicated. For nearly 2 centuries, European cartographers did not doubt its existence. For the average European, Tartaria was the land from which the great invasions came. The land of Genghis Khan and the endless steppes, a space that seems unknown, vast, and difficult to understand. The very name begins to be associated with Tartarus, the underworld from ancient Greek mythology. For many, it is a land of fear and the unknown. In the 18th century, several scholars began to ask the same question. If Tartary was so vast, why did it disappear so quietly? There was no great final war. There was no official end. There was no peace treaty to mark its disappearance. The German philosopher and historian Johann Herder offers one explanation. According to him, Europeans used the word Tartary as a general name for many different Turkic and Mongol peoples, without distinguishing between them. Later, the French geographer Conrad Malte-Brun studied Arabic, Persian, and Chinese sources. He concluded that he found nowhere a unified state called Great Tartary. He discovered dozens of separate khanates, tribal alliances, and political entities, each with its own history, rulers, and capital. Thus, a new understanding gradually took shape. Tartary was probably not a single country, but a European name for a vast region inhabited by many different peoples and states. But that doesn't make the story any less impressive. Behind one name was a complex political map, including the Kazakh Khanate, the Dzungarian Khanate, the Siberian Khanate, the Bukhara Emirate, the Khiva Khanate, and dozens of other political entities. Later, the Russian Empire gradually expanded its influence over these territories. The Kazan Khanate fell in 1552. The Astrakhan Khanate fell in 1556. The Siberian Khanate fell by the end of the 16th century. Over time, the old names disappeared from maps and were replaced by new administrative names. Thus, Tartaria gradually disappeared not as a geography, but as a concept. And here an interesting question arises. When we use broad definitions today for entire regions and civilizations, aren't we repeating the same mistake that Europeans once made with Tartary? Beijing, 1759. The throne room of the Qianlong Emperor. The ceiling rises 30 meters. The air is saturated with sandalwood and cold stone dust. Before the throne stands a man on his knees. He is the last Khan of the Dzungars. His people have not just lost a war, they have almost ceased to exist. Over the previous 3 years, Chinese and Manchurian troops had killed between 600,000 and 800,000 people. According to various estimates, this was between 70 and 80% of the entire Dzungarian people. The rest were killed by smallpox, which some sources say was deliberately spread through infected blankets, a century and a half before such tactics were associated with the American colonists' wars against the Indians. This is one of the largest genocides in human history, and almost no one knows about it because the victims were perceived as part of Tartary. And since they are part of Tartary, they don't have a separate history that needs to be remembered. Ordinary people then explain the disappearance of the Dzungars simply. It was the will of heaven. The barbarians were punished for their resistance to the Son of Heaven. So spoke the court historiographers of Qianlong, and so wrote the official chronicles that later formed the basis of Chinese historiography. In this version, the Dzungars are not a people with cities, pastures, Buddhist monasteries, and diplomatic relations with Tibet and Russia. They are simply an obstacle that history removes. European observers who received information about the destruction of the Dzungarian Khanate perceived it as another episode in the pacification of Tartary. No grief, no investigation. Just another white spot on the map, getting a little smaller. But in the 1960s, the American historian Joseph Fletcher from Harvard began systematically collecting Manchurian, Chinese, Mongolian, and Russian archival documents from this period. His method was simple and ruthless. He compares the population figures before and after the war. The numbers don't match. The difference is monstrous. Fletcher died in 1984 without completing his life's work. His students published some of his research posthumously. The historical community accepted the discoveries, but almost immediately forgot about them. The topic turned out to be politically inconvenient. Modern China controls Xinjiang, the land where the Dzungarian cities once stood. To acknowledge the 18th century genocide is to question the legitimacy of the current rule over the region. The Dzungars don't disappear simply because they lose. They disappear because the victors need their land, but not their memory. And the scientific explanation of how this is possible sounds scarier than any myth. The Dzungarian Khanate existed for about 150 years, from 1634 to 1758. During this time, it became the last great nomadic state in Eurasia, capable of opposing both Russia and China. The Dzungars have artillery. They learn technology from Russian and Swedish military engineers. They have a bureaucratic apparatus, their own script, created by the Buddhist monk Zaya Pandita in 1648, specifically for the Dzungarian language. They have diplomatic missions in Rome and Moscow. These are not savages. This is a country that has stood in the way of two expanding empires for too long. The irony is that one of the last documents that records the existence of the Dzungarian Khanate as a sovereign state is a Russian diplomatic act. Russia negotiated borders with the Dzungars literally in the months when Chinese troops were already completing their destruction. When the news reached St. Petersburg, the documents were quietly filed away in the archives. To admit that an ally had disappeared was diplomatically awkward. They've been there for 2 centuries. They were discovered by Soviet historians in the 1940s. They were classified. They were partially declassified in the 1990s. And we still don't know everything. But if one of the greatest genocides of the 18th century can be hidden under the word Tartary, then how many similar stories are still hidden under convenient labels today? St. Petersburg, 1817. An office near the Moika. Through the window, you can see the gray Petersburg December, cold, like a censorship stamp. A man sits at the table, leafing through a pile of cards. His name is Johann Gottlieb Georg, a German naturalist in the Russian service. He has just completed his work, a description of all the peoples of the Russian Empire. He opens the last chapter and realizes that he didn't just write geography. He wrote an obituary. Everything that Europeans have called Tartary for centuries, dozens of peoples, languages, cultures, and state traditions, now has one official name: provinces of the Russian Empire. Siberian Governorate, Orenburg region, Astrakhan region, Tomsk region, same names, same laws, same administrative language. This is not just a military victory. This is an administrative replacement of reality. Tartary was not conquered by force of arms alone. It was renamed. Ordinary officials of that time sincerely believed that they were doing a good deed. They brought civilization to wild lands, education, order, uniform law. In 1822, the Siberian governor Mikhail Speransky created a charter for the management of foreigners, one of the most progressive colonial documents of its time. It recognizes the right of nomads to a traditional way of life, allows for their own courts, and guarantees land. On paper, this looks like respect. In practice, it means something else. From that moment on, they are no longer Kazakhs, Buryats, Yakuts, and peoples with a 1,000-year history. They are foreigners. A legal category that, in its very definition, places them one step lower than local Russian subjects. One term, and all the complexity disappears. At the same time, the German linguist Wilhelm von Humboldt was studying the languages of the peoples of the former Tartary. He discovered something extraordinary. Kazakh, Uyghur, Uzbek, Yakut, and dozens of other languages belong to a large Turkic language family. It's as if someone suddenly discovered that French, Spanish, Italian, and Romanian were all connected as parts of a common linguistic tradition. Humboldt understood something important. Tartaria on the maps reflected reality. Not a political unity, but a cultural, linguistic, and civilizational space. The peoples that Europeans lump together under the word Tatars are indeed connected to each other through trade routes, common mythologies, similar legal systems, and a Buddhist Turkic cultural matrix. This is not one state, but it is one civilizational zone. And here is the bitter truth that Georgi writes down in his office, but fails to publish in full. Among the peoples he describes, there are those whose languages he can no longer fully record because their last speakers are dying, just as he is writing. Not from war, but from smallpox brought in by trade convoys, from famine caused by the loss of traditional pastures, from the new state lands that the empire sold to traders for furs and profit. The peoples of Tartary are not dying just from swords, they are dying from integration. This is the quietest form of extinction. They don't destroy you outright, they just make you part of something bigger. Your children no longer remember what your name was before they renamed you. And here remains the question that never leaves us. If an administrative renaming can erase an entire civilization in 2 generations, what happens today to cultures that dissolve not in imperial provinces, but in the global internet? So, what have we learned? Encyclopedia Britannica from 1771 describes a vast territory with an area of about 14 million square kilometers, larger than the whole of Europe. It was called Great Tartaria, and for 2 centuries its existence was not questioned by European cartographers, not because the cartographers were stupid, but because they saw a real cultural and linguistic unity where the political boundaries were too complex for a single name. The word Tatars was attached to the Mongols by mistake because the first vanguard of Genghis Khan's army was composed of Tatars. The French monk Guillaume de Rubruck corrected this error as early as 1253, but his correction was ignored. For 6 centuries, one of the greatest conquering civilizations in history has lived in European memory under a foreign name. And a name is not just a sound. a name determines whose story will be told. The Dzungarian Khanate, the last great nomadic state in Eurasia, was destroyed by 1759 in a genocide that claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. They had artillery, writing, and diplomatic missions in Rome and Moscow. But their demise goes almost unnoticed because they are perceived as part of Tartary, rather than as a separate civilization with a history that needs to be remembered. The Russian Empire didn't just conquer Tartary, it renamed it provinces. Peoples with a 1,000-year history were transformed into administrative categories. Languages don't disappear only from prohibitions, but also from integration. This is one of the most effective forms of disappearance, when the victim doesn't resist because they are convinced that this is progress. And here comes the big takeaway. History is not just what happened. History is what was named, written down, and passed down by the victors. Great Tartaria existed, but not necessarily as a single state with clear borders, a capital, and a single language. It existed as a vast civilizational space that did not fit into European categories of statehood. First, European cartographers lump it together under one label. Then, imperial administrators dissolve it under other labels. Civilization disappears twice, first in words, then in silence. Thank you for staying with us until the end. The history of Great Tartaria is not just a story of old maps and forgotten names. It is a warning that entire peoples, languages, and civilizations can disappear, not only from wars, but also from renaming, silence, and convenient historical labels. And what do you think? Was Tartaria a real civilization zone misunderstood by Europe, or just a huge name on the maps of the old world? Write your opinion in the comments. If you found the video interesting, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. This way, you help these forgotten stories reach more people. Thank you for being with us. Until the next story.